Hi everyone! Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. The wind, sharp with pine and iced earth, carried scents Elara ignored. Only the phantom ozone of abused magic filled her senses. A bitter reminder. Not the iron reek of spilled blood from that terrible night. From her vantage point, the valley spread below, a panorama she barely registered. Her fingers clawed at the frozen soil, a futile attempt to ground herself. Memory, however, was a relentless tide, pulling her back. Flight. Always flight. The rhythmic drone echoed in her skull. The chance that once defined her now scored her ruin. Torches had haloed the ritual circle, painting the scene with grotesque, dancing shadows. Opposite her stood Malric, eyes blazing with a hunger she'd mistaken for devotion. "Ready, Elara?" His voice, once a comforting balm, now rasped with chilling ambition. She forced a smile. "Always, Malric. For the pack," a lie that tasted like ash on her tongue. She'd been prepared to offer him everything, even her soul. He reached out. His touch, once an electrifying caress, now felt like a trespass, a frigid tendril probing for her core. "The transfer begins," he declared, authority ringing hollow. Then, a surge. Not the promised sharing, but a brutal extraction, tearing at her essence. A strangled gasp escaped her. "Malric, what is this?" Her vision swam. His smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp, too predatory. "Ascension, Elara. Mine." An agony beyond bearing bloomed within her, her magic ripped away, flowing into him. He glowed with her stolen life. "You betrayed me," she managed, the words frail. A harsh, triumphant laugh echoed through the clearing. "Sentimentality is a luxury I can no longer afford, Elara." Then, oblivion. She recalled the agonizing cold, a bone-deep chill that consumed her as she lay broken in the snow. The chanting ceased, replaced by the keening wind. The torches died, leaving her to a suffocating darkness. The pain lived in her memory. The physical torment of her ravaged body, but also the deeper wound of betrayal, the shattering of trust, the realization that her love had been weaponized against her. Whispers, faint at first, then insistent, beckoned her toward surrender, toward the icy embrace of death. Yet something resisted, a defiant spark, refusing to be quelled, a burning ember of fury fueling her will. "I will not die here," she vowed, her voice a ragged rasp. "I will make him pay." She crawled, inch by agonizing inch, towards the faint moonlight filtering through the trees, her body screaming, her mind fixed on survival. She found a shallow cave, a dent in the rock face, and huddled there, shivering uncontrollably, her life force draining. But even in that abyss of despair, the ember of rage remained. "I will not let him win," she silently screamed. "I will take everything." As she slipped into unconsciousness, a vision unfolded. Flames, blood, Malric's empire reduced to cinders, and herself, standing victorious amidst the ruin. Elara's eyes flickered open, the memory receding. The wind still howled, but it carried the promise of change. Years had been spent honing her skills, mastering new arts, forging herself into a weapon. The naive girl who'd trusted Malric was gone, replaced by a warrior draped in shadow. She flexed her hands, feeling the thrum of power different from what Malric stole, born of pain, resilience, and unyielding resolve. Dark levers, supple and silent, clothed her, allowing her to move with deadly grace. A cowl concealed her face, masking her identity. Elara Meadowlight, the pack healer, was no more. Now, she was something else, something dangerous. Below, the valley unfolded, a patchwork of emerald and gold. In the distance, the sprawling pack lands pulsed with life, dominated by the imposing fortress that served as Malric's stronghold. He would anticipate her arrival. He might even sense her approach. He would prepare, but he would not recognize her, not the broken girl he'd discarded. He would not perceive the tempest gathering on the horizon. Elara inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the frigid air. The time had come. With one last glance at the valley, she stepped from the precipice, dissolving into the shadows. She moved like a wraith, a predator stalking its quarry. The echoes of treachery resonated within, no longer a source of pain, but of potent purpose. She had returned to reclaim what Malric had stolen, and she would not rest until his throne was dust. Driven by a cold, consuming determination, she was a ghost resurrected, a specter of vengeance ready to begin a dark game where her victory was assured. He wouldn't detect the approaching doom until the very foundation of his world cracked and crumbled before him. Shadow among wolves, the tang of resin and loamy earth perfumed Elara's cloak as she neared Malric's domain. No fence defined the border, but a palpable shift in the atmosphere, an oppressive sense of ownership prickled her skin. She halted, her breath a fleeting cloud in the crisp air, and sifted the wind for any immediate threat. Though years had elapsed, the memory of this land seared her soul, a brutal reminder of perfidy and bereavement. She dissolved into the umbrage of ancient trees, a wraith slipping between colossal boles. The forest floor, a mosaic of russet and gold leaves subdued by the dimming light, provided ideal concealment. From her perch atop a ridge she surveyed the pack's quotidian existence, a miniature reflection of Malric's autocracy. Lazy tendrils of smoke spiraled from haphazardly constructed chimneys, marking the settlement's core. She observed figures wolves in human guise attending to chores, skirmishing in the fields, their movements a blend of ennui and barely contained rage. A palpable tension permeated the air, echoing her own simmering rancor. For days, Elara maintained her vigil, dissecting their habits, their pecking order, their soft spots. She catalogued the weariness etched on youthful faces, the smoldering defiance in the gazes of elders who recalled a life before Malric's iron fist. He'd promised strength, opulence, a renaissance for their kind, yet delivered only subjugation and dread. One twilight, as the sun plunged beneath the horizon, daubing the sky in shades of claret and violet, Elara witnessed an incident that calcified her resolve. A young wolf, scarcely past boyhood in human reckoning, faltered under a load of kindling, scattering it across the muddy ground. Before he could recover, Malric materialized. He was a figure of domineering presence, radiating sheer force and menace. His eyes, like chipped glacier ice, held no warmth as he assessed the scene. Without a word, he struck, his hand a swift, brutal arc across the boy's face. The youth cried out, collapsing to his knees, his cheek blooming with a livid bruise. Incompetence is anathema. Malric's voice resonated, amplified across the valley. Weakness is pestilence, and I will not tolerate its spread within my pack. He continued his tirade, each syllable a barb laced with scorn. The pack watched in mute subjugation, their faces impassive masks of fear. No one dared interfere. A torrent of fury surged through Elara, a blaze threatening to incinerate her. She clutched the dagger's hilt, her knuckles stark white. To emerge from the shadows, confront Malric, and unleash her contained power seemed almost too simple. But that diverged from her strategy. Not yet. She needed cunning, to dismantle his dominion from within, to incite his own followers against him. She needed to demonstrate a superior path, one of potency and empathy, of unity and liberty. The injustice, the flagrant cruelty leveled at the young wolf, sealed her purpose. She wouldn't merely assassinate Malric. She would unveil him as the despot he was, strip him of authority, and leave him broken, isolated. But first, allies. She retreated further into the forest's embrace, her mind a whirlwind of plans. This she couldn't accomplish alone. She needed to locate those willing to stand and fight, those who craved freedom, those prepared to risk all for a life reclaimed. Under the inky shroud of night, Elara commenced her search. She moved with feline grace, senses heightened, eavesdropping for whispers of dissent, scrutinizing for signs of revolt. Difficult though it would be, she was committed to finding those who shared her vision, those who would rally alongside her. The breeze carried rumors through the canopy, murmurs of discontent, chronicles of unrealized promises and shattered ideals. She tracked those murmurs, guided by the frail tendrils of hope still glowing within the pack. She recognized it in the eyes of a young woman forced into a barren marriage to cement a bond. She detected it in the stooped shoulders of a former warrior, stripped of title and prestige for questioning Malric's tactics. She perceived it in the rebellious glare of a healer coerced into using her talents for Malric's selfish ends. Every encounter held peril, each exchange a precarious dance of trust and skepticism. She revealed only select pieces of her biography, alluding to her real identity, observing their reactions, probing their commitment. She spoke of an alternative course, a path of fellowship and emancipation, where fortitude was measured not by brutality, but by kindness. Gradually, tentatively, a cadre began to coalesce around her, attracted by her magnetism, her strength, and the prospect of a brighter future. A disparate group, unified by their shared grievances and their hunger for change. Among them Kale, a young warrior whose spirit hadn't been entirely crushed by Malric. Initially skeptical, leery of her sudden ingress and her nebulous guarantees, he was nonetheless drawn to her unyielding resolve and the inner fire that blazed in her gaze. "Why this trust?" he interrogated, during a covert rendezvous deep in the woods. "You emerge from the shadows, promising deliverance. What benefit is this to you?" Elara held his stare, her expression steady. "I was once one of you," she responded, her voice a low timbre. "I endured Malric's tyranny. I forfeited everything. Now, I've returned to reclaim what was stolen, to assist you in reclaiming your lives." She paused for her words to resonate. "I seek no power for myself. I seek recompense. I seek liberty for us all." Kale studied her face, searching for guile. He discerned only sincerity, a deeply rooted conviction that echoed his own aspirations. Trusting her was a gamble, but continuing under Malric's dominance was untenable. "What do you need from us?" he asked, determination lacing his tone. Elara smiled, a spark igniting in her eyes. "Firstly," she stated, "we must comprehend our adversary. We must unearth his flaws, his trepidations, his weaknesses." And thus, the shadow amidst wolves commenced to spin her web, gathering allies, anticipating the approaching tempest. The road ahead was perilous, but Elara was resolute. She had weathered betrayal, loss, unfathomable suffering. She had risen from the ashes, tempered and unbreakable, and she would not rest until Malric's reign was extinguished and the pack was finally liberated. A calculated encounter. The scent of wet loam and moldering leaves clung to Elara as she slipped through the timbered gloom. This night wasn't about predation. It was about provocation. Each crunch of leaf litter, each snapping twig underfoot was a carefully measured risk, a signal broadcast into the darkness. She needed to be detected. Deliberately, she intersected the sentry path, a route etched in her mind weeks prior during clandestine observations. The forest vibrated with the deep-chested rumbles of patrolling wolves. Slowing her advance, she let her aroma billow on the air currents, an undisguised invitation. A sharp canine yelp fractured the silence. "Hold! Identify yourself!" Elara halted, pivoting to face the pair of guards who emerged from the dense undergrowth. They were pups, scarcely past their apprenticeship, their pelts still carrying a lingering puppy scent. A keen, acrid fear emanated from them. "Excellent." Intimidation was a weapon. "I am Elara," she announced, her tone level and firm, yet edged with defiance. No submissive posture, no sign of deference. The larger of the two, a scarred brute with flint-colored eyes, advanced a step. "Elara? The scent is foreign. You don't belong to Malric." The accusation hung in the air. "I do not," Elara confirmed, her emerald gaze unwavering. "Then explain your presence on pack territory." The smaller, more sinewy wolf circled her warily. "Merely passing through," Elara parried, her delivery smooth. A fabrication, naturally, but one honed to perfection. The scarred wolf's lip curled back, revealing formidable teeth. "No one traverses these lands without Malric's consent. You're trespassing." "Indeed?" Elara inclined her head, a spark of amusement flickering in her eyes. She could feel the potent energy thrumming within her, the magic Malric had attempted to steal, now blazing with renewed intensity. The moment for demonstration had arrived. Her focus landed on a wizened oak, its branches gnarled and skeletal against the twilight sky. Without a word, without physical contact, she wielded her will, channeling a sliver of her power. The atmosphere shimmered. The oak creaked in protest. Then, with a thunderous report, the tree fractured near its base and plummeted, its heavy boughs shaking the ground with seismic force. The patrol recoiled, their eyes widened in disbelief and primal dread. The air swirled with the sharp tang of splintered wood and ozone. "Perhaps," Elara remarked, her voice now carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of command, "you should inform Malric that I am capable." She resumed her journey, not bothering to witness their retreat. She knew they would be fleeing, panic driving them back to the stronghold. Onward she moved, deeper into the woods, adrenaline singing in her veins. A calculated risk, revealing even a fragment of her might. But it was essential. Malric needed to know she was present. He needed to fear her. The great hall stank of carrion and hubris. Malric occupied his barbaric throne, a hulking wolf cloaked in dried blood-colored fur. His glacial eyes swept over the faces of his pack, searching for any hint of weakness, any whisper of rebellion. The pair of patrol wolves, tails clamped tightly between their legs, stood trembling before him. "Speak!" Malric thundered, his voice a guttural rumble that resonated through the cavernous space. The scarred wolf, the larger of the two, stammered, "Alpha, we encountered an intruder." "An intruder?" Malric's muzzle twisted in a snarl of disdain. On my domain? You allowed a stranger to roam unhindered? We attempted to apprehend her, Alpha, the wiry wolf interjected, his voice barely audible. But she possessed power. Power? Malric scoffed. What drivel is this? No wolf surpasses my power. She felled a tree, Alpha, the scarred wolf blurted out, his voice trembling. With nothing, no fangs, no claws, just a glance. Malric's eyes narrowed to slits. He disbelieved them, yet couldn't ignore the sheer terror saturating their scent. Describe this individual, he demanded. She was live, the wiry wolf began. Her pelt shone like moonlight on pristine snow, and her eyes like emeralds, burning with an inner conflagration. A disturbing tremor ran through Malric, a fleeting recognition at the periphery of his thoughts. Moonlight on snow-emerald eyes. It couldn't be possible. Did she offer a name? She identified herself as Elara, the scarred wolf confessed. The name detonated in Malric's mind like a physical explosion. Elara. Years had passed, yet he could never expunge that name, that visage. He had believed her vanquished, broken, purged of her very essence. But the power it defied coincidence. Locate her, Malric roared, his voice choked with barely contained wrath. Find her and deliver her to me, alive. I demand to know her motives, and if she dares resist, eliminate her. He dismissed the patrol with an imperious flick of his paw. As they scrambled to obey, he rose from his seat, his imposing frame casting a vast, menacing shadow across the hall. Striding to a nearby window, he gazed out at the encroaching darkness that blanketed the woods. Elara returned from oblivion, and imbued with power. He had underestimated her resilience. He had presumed to have stripped her of everything. But he had erred. She had resurfaced, and he harbored a chilling premonition that she had not returned for pleasantries. A slow, cruel smile stretched across his face, revealing predatory teeth. He had relished draining her power once before. The second time would be even more delightful, and this time he would ensure her permanent demise. But a seed of trepidation had been sown. The fear he had so readily inflicted upon others now clawed at him. Elara had returned, and the balance of dominion had irrevocably shifted. The chase had commenced. The Alpha's intrigue Malric waved off the patrol wolf with a dismissive flick of his massive paw. A tree felled by sorcery? You mistake me for a fool, Phelan. Elara Meadowlight is dead. I insured it personally. He traversed his immense den, the cool stone a stark contrast to the simmering fury that consumed him, a long-cultivated resentment, the very fuel of his ambitions. Phelan fidgeted, the fur on his shoulders prickling with unease. Alpha, I appreciate your disbelief, but the cut was surgical. No sign of tooth or claw, and the air it thrummed with a residual energy, a perfume unlike any I've known. Seductive, yet laced with danger. Malric halted his pacing, amber eyes narrowing to keen slits. Seductive? He scoffed, yet a subtle apprehension had taken root. The name, Elara Meadowlight, echoed within him, a jarring note in the anthem of his dominance. He had silenced that note years ago, or so he had believed. Elaborate on this scent, Malric demanded, his voice a gravelly rasp. Phelan hesitated, grasping for the appropriate descriptor. Like a wildflower's pulped under a tempest. Sweet, but with a sharp tang of ozone. And something older, primordial. Primordial. The word struck Malric with the force of a physical blow. Elara's magic had been intrinsically linked to the ancient earth, a bond he had coveted and ultimately usurped. But could she truly be resurrected? Wielding such potent force, hadn't he drained the majority of her life essence, leaving behind a mere shell, barely clinging to existence? He emitted a low growl, a resonant vibration that pulsed through the den. Preposterous! She was feeble, insignificant. I stripped her bare. Yet even as the words left him, he recalled the incandescent defiance in her gaze, a blazing spark that had persisted even as he consumed her. A tremor of disquiet coursed through him, a frigid whisper of fear he stubbornly repressed. He turned from Phelan, transfixed by the depths of the fire pit. The licking flames twisted and writhed, mirroring the inner chaos that churned within him. He had labored too arduously, sacrificed too profoundly, to allow a specter from the past to jeopardize his reign. He had remade the pack, forged them into a weapon, an unstoppable force under his complete and utter command. He would not permit Elara, or even the memory of her, to dismantle everything. He spun back to face Phelan, his eyes blazing with renewed resolve. The patrol, did they see her clearly? Obtain a precise description? Yes, Alpha, Phelan replied, his voice barely audible. She was changed. Her hair was longer, a deeper shade of black. Her eyes, oh, they shone with an uncanny luminance. And her carriages, she exuded an unnerving confidence, a palpable power. Unnerving? Malric echoed, the word dripping with scorn. But beneath the bravado, the unease intensified. Assurance was a formidable weapon, and in the hands of an adversary, it could prove deadly. He weighed his options, calculating the potential gains and losses. To ignore the reports would be the epitome of folly. If it were truly Elara, and she possessed even a sliver of the power Phelan alluded to, she could galvanize the malcontents within the pack, those who still murmured of the ancestral ways, the traditions prior to his autocratic rule. He had broken their spirits, subjugated their wills, but the embers of dissent still flickered beneath the surface. Elara could ignite those embers into a raging inferno. Yet to confront her directly, that was a perilous gamble. He remained ignorant of the scope of her power, the nature of her designs. He needed intelligence, a comprehensive appraisal of the threat she posed. A cruel smile curled his lips. There existed only one avenue to certainty. Locate her, he commanded, his voice now a low, menacing rumble. Find this woman. Deliver her to me. I wish to assess this power firsthand. I need to ascertain if the wraith of Elara Meadowlight has indeed returned. Phelan bowed his head, relief washing over his features. He had braced himself for rage, possibly even retribution for conveying such disquieting tidings. It shall be done, Alpha. But, Malric added, his eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger, do not inflict harm. I require her alive, untouched. Escort her to me unscathed. He paused, relishing the anticipation that coiled within him like a serpent. I have inquiries I wish to pose, and perhaps I possess a proposition for her as well. He conjured an image of Elara, humbled and broken, pleading for absolution. The mental image sent a jolt of dark pleasure through him. He would luxuriate in her terror, savor her despair. He would remind her of her shortcomings, of his ultimate ascendancy. As Phelan turned to depart, Malric added one final directive, his voice barely a whisper. And Phelan, maintain absolute secrecy. I do not want the pack to be alerted, not yet. Allow them to remain fixated on their assigned tasks. Allow them to persist in their belief in my might, in my invincibility. Phelan nodded sharply and disappeared into the intricate network of tunnels within the den. Malric was left alone with his inner demons, the volatile flames painting grotesque shadows across the cavern walls. He circled the fire pit, his senses heightened. He could almost detect her, the subtle suggestion of wildflowers and ozone that Phelan had depicted. He could almost perceive her presence, a faint tremor in the air, a veiled challenge carried on the wind. He ceased his pacing and stared into the heart of the flames, his eyes burning with a complex blend of expectation and trepidation. He had underestimated Elara once before, a mistake he wouldn't repeat. This time, he would stand prepared. This time, he would crush her spirit completely. This time, he would obliterate her from the tapestry of existence. He bared his fangs in a silent, feral snarl. Let her approach. Let her unleash her power, her defiance, her futile attempts at retribution. He would confront her directly, and he would reveal to her the true definition of power. He would remind her that he was the alpha, the apex, the sovereign of his domain. And he would demonstrate, unequivocally, that Elara Meadowlight was nothing more than a faded echo, a phantom of a past he had long since interred. But even as he watched the flames dance and flicker, a persistent doubt lingered. What if she sought something other than vengeance? What if she harbored a different agenda entirely? And what if, against all reasonable odds, she had unearthed a means to surpass him, to reclaim the power he had pilfered? The mere notion sent a chill coursing down his spine, a frigid premonition of events to come. He had initiated a hazardous game, and he sensed that the stakes were significantly higher than he could possibly fathom. Beneath the surface, the rusted portal screeched, its hinges screaming in discordant unison as the guards propelled Elara into the enclosure. She nearly fell, steadying herself against the rough-cut stone, inhaling the reek of chilled earth and feral canines. An eternity. So long since she'd inhaled this frigid air, felt the land's glacial bite. An eternity since Malric had plundered her existence. He occupied the far end of the enclosure, elevated on a dais. Bulkier than memory served, his physique a testament to brute force. The potent charisma she recalled now magnified, radiating outwards in tangible waves. His once pristine silver mane flowed freely now, a wild halo framing a countenance etched with years of absolute dominion. He leaned back against a grotesque throne of woven boughs and gleaming obsidian, his expression bored, almost languid. A deceptive posture, she knew. The deadliest predators often exuded the most nonchalant air. The guards shoved her onward, their vise-like grips bruising her arms. She averted her gaze from Malric, fixing it on the time-worn flagstones beneath her boots, the tenacious weeds stubbornly piercing the cracks. Fortitude, she reminded herself. She would not yield. So? Malric's voice resonated, amplified by the open space. This is the enchantress audacious enough to trespass. I was led to believe I would witness a spectacle. Instead, I find disappointment. Elara finally raised her head. Her eyes locked with his, unwavering, a spark of ironic amusement flickering within them. Disappointment hinges on perspective, Alpha Malric. A tremor ran through the assembled wolves. Murmurs swelled, hushed and apprehensive. She had dared to address him with such familiarity. Malric's eyes sharpened, the feigned boredom vanishing, replaced by a glacial, calculating assessment. He descended the dais, each footfall a deliberate thunderclap in the ensuing silence. He halted inches from her, towering above. His scent, once a source of comfort, now choked her with its arrogance and the stench of decay. He reached out, his large hand seizing her chin, forcing her face upward. His touch, rough, possessive. You possess a certain audacity, I'll concede that. But defiance is a fragile thing. He scrutinized her face, his eyes searching, struggling to place her. A ghost of recognition stirred, a faint echo in the recesses of his mind, but remained elusive. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a low, guttural threat. "Identify yourself." Elara offered a slight, knowing smile. "A name is but a signifier, Alpha. Actions define." He released her, his hand dropping to hang at his side. Frustration flickered across his features. He was accustomed to unquestioning obedience, to fear. This woman offered neither. She was an enigma, a puzzle that defied immediate solution, and the defiance grated on him. "You emanate magic," he said, circling her slowly, like a predator sizing up its quarry. "Pure, unbridled magic. Intriguing. Far more than I initially surmised." He paused behind her, his breath a hot whisper against her neck. "Tell me, sorceress, from whence did you acquire such strength?" "A strength approaching my own?" Elara remained still, refusing to betray any vulnerability. "Power permeates all, Alpha. One need only learn the art of channeling it." Malric chuckled, a rasping, mirthless sound. "Evasive answers. I abhor evasion. It cultivates uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds sedition." He turned to face her, his expression hardening into granite. "I brook no sedition. I obliterate it." He snapped his fingers, and a juvenile wolf, barely more than a whelp, was thrust forward. The pup quaked, his eyes reflecting pure terror. Malric seized the pup by the nape of its neck, hoisting it aloft. "Let us observe how readily your resolve crumbles, shall we?" Malric squeezed tighter, a deep growl vibrating within him. "Reveal the source of your power, sorceress, or this pup will bear the brunt." Elara's eyes blazed. She advanced, her voice a dangerous murmur. "Do not prey on the defenseless, Malric. It ill becomes you." He laughed, the sound amplified this time. "Defenseless? In my pack, there exists no innocence, only strength and weakness. And this whelp is undeniably weak." He tightened his grip, and the pup whimpered, its tiny body spasming. Elara clenched her fists, the magic within her churning. Threatening to surge forth, she had to maintain control. She couldn't reveal the extent of her capabilities, not yet, not here. "Release the pup," she commanded, her voice barely audible. "And what incentive do you offer?" Malric countered, his eyes gleaming with malicious pleasure. "What enticement?" Elara drew a deep breath, forcing composure upon herself. "I offer a demonstration." Malric raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A demonstration? Of precisely what nature?" "Of my potency," Elara stated, her voice gaining conviction. "A contest, a trial of strength. Should I prevail, you release the pup. Should you prevail—" She paused, allowing the silence to thicken. "You are free to dispose of me as you desire." A wave of hushed murmurs rippled through the assembly. They could scarce believe she dared challenge Malric, the most formidable alpha in memory. He considered her proposition, his eyes narrowed, weighing the potential gains and losses. Here lay a chance to gauge her power, to ascertain whether she truly presented a threat. And, should he triumph, he could subjugate her, bend her to his will, and assimilate her abilities into his own. "Very well," he uttered, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "I accept your wager. But be forewarned, sorceress. You comprehend not the forces arrayed against you. He flung the pup aside, and it scrambled away, whimpering, disappearing into the mass of wolves. Time will reveal all, Elara countered, her gaze locked on Malric. Time will reveal all. The throng parted, forming a ring around them. The air thrummed with anticipation, with the raw energy of two potent beings poised to collide. Elara held her ground, her heart pounding, her mind racing. This was it, the moment she had anticipated, the confrontation she had prepared for these many munda. Years. She stood at last, face to face with Malric, the architect of her stolen existence, and she was poised to reclaim it. A show of strength, the arena blazed under the magically amplified sun. Dust devils pirouetted, each particle a miniature mirror reflecting the pack's eager faces. Near the enclosure's edge, the pup trembled, its fear a palpable aura. Malric, a figure of raw arrogance, gestured toward a colossal stone block that dwarfed even his considerable stature. Simple trial. His voice resonated, bouncing off the stands. Move the stone. First to displace it a full body length claims victory. And understand this, Meadowlight. No magic. Unadulterated brawn alone. Elara's eyes met his, a hint of amusement dancing within. As you command, Alpha, she replied, her tone a deceptive placidity. The pure strength, condition played directly into her hands. Years she devoted to artfully weaving magic into her very being. A subtle current flowing beneath the surface, undetectable to the untrained eye. A shield forged from necessity. Malric advanced on the stone, his physique a testament to brute force. He gripped the chilled, rough surface, knuckles bone white as he began to exert himself. The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of encouragement crashing over him. Veins bulged on his brow as he strained, the massive stone emitting a low groan under the pressure. An acrid musk of sweat and wolf filled the air as he shifted it, agonizingly slowly. Elara observed him, her expression an enigma. She recognized the performance, the posturing for the adoring gallery, the sheer delight in his dominance. Yet, she also detected the strain, the minute tremor in his arms that hinted at the monumental effort. Impressive, without question, but insufficient. When Malric had managed to move the stone roughly halfway, he paused, gasping for air. Turning towards Elara, a smirk of triumph played on his lips. Your turn, Meadowlight. Let's see if your strength matches your defiance. Elara approached, her movements a study in grace, a sharp contrast to Malric's raw power. She traced the stone's frigid surface with her hand, as if acquainting herself with its density, its inertia. Inwardly, she reached out with her magic, not to directly manipulate the Grakal stone, but to amplify her own natural abilities. Her focus honed on reinforcing sinew, fortifying bone, and channeling the earth's vital energy into her core. A delicate ballet, a subtle enhancement imperceptible to the casual observer. A surge of power resonated within, a tingling pulse coursing through her. Planting her feet squarely, she grounded herself, then, with a measured breath, placed her hands firmly on the stone. A hush fell over the arena, the collective breath of the crowd suspended in anticipation. Elara offered no roar, no grunt of exertion. Instead, she directed her will, blending the amplified earth energies with her subtly woven magic into a fluid, controlled action. The stone yielded. No agonizing inch by inch, but a seamless, almost effortless slide. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Malric's smirk dissolved, replaced by a mask of stunned disbelief. The stone moved a body length, then another. Elara pressed on, exceeding the required distance, manipulating the stone with a liveness that belied its immense weight. The spectators exploded in a cacophony of shouts and cheers, their initial shock quickly transforming into awe. Finally, she ceased, stepping back from the stone. She turned to Malric, her expression serene, almost apologetic. "Was that adequate, Alpha?" Malric stared, shifting his gaze between the displaced stone and Elara. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. He couldn't process the scene before him. He had anticipated a grueling struggle, a visible display of effort. He had envisioned victory, a humiliating defeat for her. Instead, she had moved the stone with an ease that was profoundly unsettling. He scanned her face, searching for any trace of magic, any betraying flicker of sorcery, but found only a placid, almost benign expression. "How?" He started, then aborted the question. He refused to grant her the satisfaction of acknowledging his bewilderment. Forcing a dismissive tone, he said, "Beginner's luck, perhaps. Or maybe my efforts had already loosened it." A flimsy excuse, yet he couldn't concede the possibility that she was truly stronger. Elara offered only a smile, a knowing spark in her eyes. "Perhaps," she conceded, remaining purposely ambiguous. She knew she had planted a seed of unease in his mind, a seed destined to blossom into full-blown paranoia. The first gambit executed. He moved to free the pup, but Elara interjected. "Our agreement stipulated that I earn the pup's freedom, Alpha. Not that you bestow it. I shall release him." She approached the terrified creature, kneeling slowly, her movements designed to reassure. The pup initially recoiled, but then seemed to sense the absence of menace in her aura. Elara extended a hand, allowing the pup to tentatively sniff her fingers. Then, gently, she stroked its soft fur. "It's all right," she soothed, her voice a gentle murmur. "You're safe now." She unlatched the enclosure and nudged the pup towards the opening. It hesitated a moment, then bolted out, disappearing into the throng of onlookers. Elara rose, turning back to Malric. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Alpha, I have preparations awaiting." She offered a slight bow and departed, the crowd parting before her like the Red Sea. Malric followed her departure, his mind in turmoil. He couldn't shake the conviction that he had underestimated her, that her true potential far exceeded his initial assessment. The casualness with which she had shifted the stone, the unflappable confidence radiating from her, it hinted at a power beyond his comprehension. He'd believed he'd purged her magic years ago, but that feat of strength, it unnerved him deeply. He clenched his fists, his knuckles straining. He couldn't allow her to pose a threat. He'd invested too much in building his empire, in solidifying his position. He refused to let some resurrected sorceress dismantle it all. He turned to his lieutenant, a hulking werewolf named Kale. "Keep Meadowlight under constant surveillance," he growled. "I want a complete accounting of her actions, her conversations. And Kale, be discreet. I don't want her alerted to our interest." Kale nodded, his eyes glinting with anticipation. "As you command, Alpha." He melted into the crowd, disappearing into the shadows with wraith-like ease. Malric watched him vanish, a dark shadow crossing his features. A sense of foreboding settled upon him. He had sensed a volatile undercurrent from her, a dark magic he thought long vanquished. Caution was paramount. If she genuinely possessed the power he suspected, this contest of strength might escalate into a desperate battle for his very survival. The realization sparked a mix of terror and morbid fascination. An offer of loyalty, the reek of resin, and simmering power plays Perfumed Malric's war room. Petrified wood supported a sprawling tableau of pack territories, maps pinned down amidst the glow of sputtering oil lamps. Malric, his expression a granite mask, circled Elara like a predator sizing up prey, or perhaps a promising addition to his ranks. His glacial eyes, sharp as shards of ice, scrutinized her. "You wield a peculiar strength, Elara Meadowlight," he rumbled, his voice a low frequency that resonated in her bones. "A strength that could prove it indispensable to my pack." Elara returned his stare, her own a careful blend of deference and guarded intrigue. She permitted a wisp of manufactured fear to ghost across her face, a fleeting fragility intended to disarm. "I appreciate the acknowledgement, Alpha, but I am a traveler, seeking simple sanctuary." Malric chuckled, the sound utterly devoid of mirth. "Sanctuary is easily found, but true dominion, real sway, those are prizes won, not gifted. And I sense a craving within you, Elara, a hunger mirroring my own ambition." He paused to let his words take root, the silence fractured only by the lamp's hiss and crackle. "Join my pack, Elara. Swear fealty to me, and you will gain more than just a safe haven. You will stand at my right hand. You will feast on the fruits of my victories." Elara lowered her gaze, feigning inner debate. This was the anticipated dance, a delicate game of influence and artifice. She had to appear hesitant, yet ultimately pliable. I'm uncertain, Alpha. I am no fighter. I lack experience in pack dynamics, or conflict." "Experience is readily learned," Malric countered, closing the distance. The reek of his authority, a potent cocktail of musk and metal, assaulted her senses. "And as for fighting, you shifted that stone, Elara. A demonstration of force that eludes even seasoned warriors. You possess a gift, a potential I intend to nurture." He extended a hand, his fingers brushing her arm. Elara quelled a shudder, her skin crawling from his touch. "Consider the possibilities, Elara. Protection from the wilderness, resources beyond measure, the chance to learn from the region's most formidable alpha." Elara remained mute, her gaze tracing the wooden floor's intricate grain. Her mind churned, calculating probabilities, anticipating his every strategy. She knew accepting meant entering a treacherous game, a plunge into the beast's lair. But it was a calculated necessity, a pivotal move in her design to topple his empire from its base. "What would be expected of me, Alpha?" she finally whispered. Malric's lips stretched into a predatory grin. "Allegiance, obedience, and the readiness to deploy your unique abilities in my service." He paused, his eyes burning with raw ambition. "The pack faces numerous threats, Elara. Foes who seek to undermine my sovereignty, to seize what is rightfully mine. I require someone trustworthy, unafraid to stain their hands." Elara's eyes lifted, meeting his with sudden intensity. "And what assurance do I have that your promises hold true, Alpha? That I won't be cast aside once I've outlived my usefulness?" Malric threw back his head, his laughter booming across the chamber. "A valid question, Elara, but consider this. I am no simpleton. I recognize true worth, and I am loath to squander valuable commodities. As long as you remain faithful, your rewards will be ample. Betray me, however, and you will face consequences beyond your comprehension." He invaded her space. "This is not merely an offer, Elara. It's advancement, an ascent from humble beginnings to significance." He leaned closer, his voice a sibilant enticement. "What is your decision?" Elara inhaled deeply, bracing herself for the performance ahead. Again, she looked down, simulating reluctance and inner turmoil. Then, slowly, deliberately, she lifted her head and met Malric's gaze with newfound resolution. "I accept, Alpha," she stated, her voice clear and unwavering. "I pledge my loyalty to you and your pack." Malric's smile broadened, exposing teeth just a shade too keen, too predatory. "Excellent," he purred. "I knew reason would prevail. Welcome to the fold, Elara Meadowlight. I suspect you'll be a prized asset." As Malric clapped a hand on her shoulder, a gesture akin to branding, Elara permitted herself a small, clandestine smile. The game had commenced. He believed he was acquiring an ally, a weapon to wield against adversaries. He was mistaken. He had merely welcomed the wolf into the fold, and soon the sheep would be scattered, the shepherd consumed. The prospect ignited a tremor of anticipation down her spine, a thrilling chill that fortified her resolve. Vengeance already tasted sweet on her tongue. Now, she merely had to savor it. Whispers of discontent, the air in the pack lands was heavy with the tang of resin and the musk of loam, an ever-present reminder of the untamed realm Malric purported to govern. Yet, beneath this facade of brute force, Elara detected a different sort of wildness, a simmering frustration that the arrogant Alpha seemed blind to. She moved among the wolves with hushed elegance, a phantom amongst shadows, observing, absorbing, learning. Acceptance into Malric's inner sanctum had granted her a privileged perspective, one she was determined to exploit. Lyra, a young she-wolf with prematurely weary eyes, was the first to approach. Elara found her by the training grounds, watching the pup's roughhousing with a blend of yearning and bitterness. "You're new," Lyra murmured, her voice barely audible. "Haven't seen you around before." Elara offered a tight-lipped smile. "Recently arrived." Malric extended an invitation. Lyra's gaze intensified, a spark of distrust flickering across her features. "He doesn't usually invite outsiders, especially someone like you." Elara inclined her head, letting the unasked question linger. "And what am I like, Lyra?" The she-wolf hesitated, then seemed to choose candor. "Powerful. I can feel the energy radiating from you. More than most here, perhaps exceeding some of the elders." She lowered her voice still further. "It's not always a gift, you know. That kind of strength makes you a target." Elara met her stare head-on. A target for whom? Lyra darted nervous glances around, as if fearing eavesdroppers. "Malric. He dislikes being overshadowed. He takes measures." Elara knew precisely the nature of those measures, having once been subjected to them. "Measures?" she pressed gently. "He siphons power from those he considers too strong, too ambitious, claims it's for the good of the pack, maintaining equilibrium. But it's merely self-preservation." Lyra's voice shook with suppressed ire. "My brother a healer, exceptionally gifted. Malric saw him as a problem. Now he barely shifts at all. A mere husk." Elara placed a comforting hand on Lyra's arm. "I'm sorry, Lyra. That's a grave injustice." Lyra recoiled momentarily, then seemed to draw resolve from Elara's unwavering gaze. "It's not just him. Others too. Talent stunted, potential squandered. All because Malric fears a challenge. He clutches power like a miser his hoard." Elara chose her words with care. "And what do the others think? Those witnessing his tactics?" Lyra looked down, scuffing at a pebble. "We murmur. We grumble in the dark. But fear silences us. Spies are everywhere. Loyalty is richly rewarded, dissent crushed without mercy. But murmurs can become thunder, Lyra. One spark can trigger a conflagration. Elara's tone was gentle, almost mesmerizing. Have you considered that the pack might benefit from a leader who cultivates ability, rather than suppressing it? One who inspires, instead of intimidating? Lyra's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope igniting within. You think that's feasible? Elara smiled, a subtle, enigmatic curve. Anything is feasible, Lyra. It hinges on your willingness to fight for it. In the following days, Elara sought out those who appeared disillusioned or marginalized. She found them in the kitchens, scrubbing pots with resentful expressions in the training yard, nursing unattended wounds in the woods, hunting alone, with defiant glints in their eyes. She listened to their accounts, their complaints, their anxieties. She heard of unfair treatment, of unbalanced distribution of resources, of broken promises and ruined aspirations. One evening, she came across Gareth, a veteran warrior tending a deep laceration on his leg. Once a respected pack member, a steadfast soldier in countless battles, his eyes now held a haunted quality, his voice thick with rancor. "Malric has altered," he croaked, as Elara efficiently cleaned his wound. "He was honorable, strong, yes, but just. Now he's simply brutal. He seizes what he wants, whenever he wants it. He no longer cares about the pack, only his own dominion. What changed him, Gareth?" Elara queried softly. Gareth sighed, a sound laden with sorrow. The sorceress magic. When he absorbed it, it warped him, made him suspicious, merciless. He sees enemies at every turn, even amongst his own. Elara's hands paused, a wave of icy anger surging through her. "And what is your opinion on the matter, Gareth? Should the pack endure his autocracy?" Gareth regarded her, his eyes reflecting fear and longing in equal measure. "I don't know. I'm just a worn-out warrior. I served him faithfully for so long. I'm not sure I possess the strength to oppose him." Elara met his gaze, her own filled with unwavering resolve. Strength isn't always about physical might, Gareth. Sometimes it's the bravery to advocate for what is just, even when difficult. It's about encouraging others to unearth their own cur. Strength. She completed bandaging his leg, her touch lingering for a brief moment. "Consider it, Gareth. Reflect on the legacy you want to leave for future generations. A pack shackled by dread, or one united by aspiration." As she departed, Elara sensed Gareth's gaze upon her, his expression pensive, uncertain. She knew she had planted a seed in his spirit, a germ of uncertainty, a spark of defiance. And with patience and careful nurturing, that seed would blossom into something potent, something capable of destabilizing Malric's reign. The murmurs of dissent grew more pronounced, spreading like tendrils through the pack territories. And Elara, the unobtrusive shade, was the catalyst. The Alpha's paranoia from the hall's periphery. Elara observed Malric, the Silver Fang Alpha, a predator trapped by invisible bars. His usually formidable aura had dissipated, replaced by a nervous tick that vibrated through the very space around him. The air practically hummed with his anxiety. He raked a hand through his silver-threaded mane, jaw clenched tight as a sprung trap. "They're watching," he rasped, the words barely audible over the fire's cozy roar. "I feel their eyes." Concealed by a tapestry depicting the pack's genesis, Elara listened, her senses on high alert. She had perceived the gradual decay of Malric's self-assurance over recent weeks. The arrogance, the self-satisfied certainty of his reign, was now tainted by suspicion and dread. Initially, she'd attributed this to her and Lyra's subtle subversions, the murmured discontent, the sidelong glances, carefully veiled acts of rebellion. Yet, this was deeper, an internal rot. Only a smattering of guards attended him. Tonight, the usual raucous clamor of his inner circle noticeably absent. He waved them away with a curt gesture. Go. Secure the grounds. Vigilance. The command allowed for no backtalk, and the guards, puzzled, dispersed into the shadows. Alone, Malric resumed his pacing, his boots striking a lonely cadence on the polished flagstones. Vipers, he hissed, the word dripping with loathing. Everywhere, vipers in the grass. Elara risked a peek through a chink in the woven threads. Malric halted before a vast, gilded mirror, his own image mocking him. He scrutinized his reflection, fingers tracing the etched lines around his eyes, the deepening creases in his forehead. They think me vulnerable, he breathed to his mirrored twin. They believe they can seize what is mine. His fist slammed into the looking-glass, a web of cracks blooming outward from the point of impact. A sliver dislodged, catching the light in a momentary spark. They will learn, he rumbled, his voice regaining a fraction of its former menace. They will all learn the price of defiance. Elara retreated deeper into the gloom, her mind churning. This was beyond paranoia. It was a wholesale implosion of confidence. The stolen power coursing through him couldn't quell the fear festering within. He was imploding. The next day, a summons drew Elara to Malric's study. The room was shrouded in gloom, heavy drapes blocking the sun, painting the space with long, oppressive shadows. Behind a massive oak desk, buried beneath a small avalanche of parchment and scrolls, sat Malric. He looked ravaged, eyes bloodshot, his once pristine attire now disheveled. Elara, he croaked, his voice rough as gravel. I require your perspective. She inclined her head, concealing her surprise. He rarely sought her opinion, preferring to trust his own judgment, or what he falsely believed to be his own unassailable wisdom. Of course, Alpha. How can I assist? There are murmurs, he said, his gaze locked on the documents before him. Murmurs of dissent, rumblings of betrayal. Elara played the innocent. Betrayal, Alpha? Surely not. The pack is steadfast. Malric's fist crashed down on the desk, scattering the parchments like leaves in a storm. Don't feign ignorance, Elara. You are not naive. You perceive. You overhear. Tell me what you have learned. She measured her response carefully. I have detected stirrings of dissatisfaction, Alpha. Some wolves are questioning your leadership. They deem it severe. Malric's eyes narrowed to slits. Severe? It is necessary. I maintain order. I ensure the pack's future. Perhaps, Elara said gently, but some believe the cost is too great. They remember a time when leadership was not synonymous with the dread. A tick pulsed in Malric's cheek. Fear is a potent weapon, Elara. It keeps them compliant. But it also fosters resentment, she countered. And resentment is a volatile element, Alpha. It can fester and spread until it consumes everything. Malric fixed her with a piercing stare. Are you offering a veiled threat, Elara? She met his gaze directly. I am merely offering a caution, Alpha. A caution you would be wise to heed. He leaned back, his expression an inscrutable mask. Who is instigating this? Who is sowing these seeds of unrest? Elara shrugged, her shoulders rising imperceptibly. I cannot say with certainty, Alpha, but I suspect it is not a singular entity, but a collective. Those who feel disregarded, those who feel unappreciated, those who feel deceived. Malric remained silent for an extended moment, his gaze drawn to the ceiling. Then he returned his attention to Elara, his eyes now burning with desperate appeal. Tell me what to do, he whispered, his voice stripped bare. How do I quell this tide? Elara smiled inwardly, a silent predator sensing weakness in its prey. This was the opening she had been anticipating. You must demonstrate that you are not the despot they perceive you to be, Alpha. You must show compassion, understanding, and clemency. Malric scoffed, derision flashing in his eyes. Clemency? They deserve punishment, not clemency. Perhaps, Elara said, but retribution will only amplify their animosity. Clemency, conversely, might disarm them. It might reveal a capacity for evolution. Malric weighed her words, his brow creased in thought. And what do you suggest I pardon them for? Elara paused, selecting her words with exquisite care. Pardon them for their skepticism, Alpha. Pardon them for their anxieties. Pardon them for their humanity. Malric remained immobile, his gaze riveted on Elara, the gears whirring in his mind. He was a trapped animal, seeking escape, and Elara, cloaked in her guise of loyal confidant, was extending a lifeline designed to hasten his downfall. As she departed the study, Elara understood the rules of the game had been irrevocably altered. Malric's paranoia was no longer merely a vulnerability to be exploited, it was a weapon to be wielded against him. She would manipulate his dread, turning him against his own pack, eroding his authority from within. The throne he had usurped would soon be hers, not through raw power, but through the subtle art of insinuation, orchestration, and the methodical dismantling of his crumbling legacy. He had stolen her power, now she would claim his throne, and all he held dear. Unfortunate events, the sun blazed upon the training grounds, usually a maelstrom of disciplined energy, now cloaked in a heavy stillness. Elara, cloaked in the guise of a meek advisor named Lyra, observed from the shaded periphery of the Alpha's tent as Malric struggled to articulate a revised battle strategy. His commands, normally thundering with assurance, were now faltering, a tangled mess. He stumbled over simple pronouncements, his pelt prickling with barely contained rage. The previous day, she had inadvertently scrambled his war room, replacing up-to-date assessments with outdated maps. Today she'd arranged for the messenger bearing revised battle orders to the border patrol to enjoy a particularly circuitous route, arriving hours behind schedule and sowing discord. Each subtle act, insignificant in isolation, wove a fabric of failing competence, imperceptibly eroding his command. "No, you dolts!" Malric bellowed, his voice cracking under the strain. "The flanks must converge!" He gesticulated wildly, nearly toppling a nearby recruit. The young wolf-shifter recoiled, fear widening his eyes. A faint smile touched Elara's mouth. Fear was a potent weapon, and just now it was aimed directly at Malric's heart. A ripple of unease spread through the assembled pack. They had witnessed Malric at his peak, a force of nature, a strategic mastermind. This was a mere shadow, a hollow imitation. Doubts, like insidious vines, began to creep into their thoughts. Later that afternoon, Malric summoned Elara to his private chambers. The air within was heavy with apprehension, a miasma of anxiety clinging to the opulent furs lining the floor. He stalked back and forth like a caged predator, his amber eyes narrowed to slits. "Lyra," he began, his voice strained. "There have been complications, unforeseen setbacks." Elara offered a respectful inclination of her head, her expression an impassive mask. "Indeed, Alpha. The Border Patrol suffered delays. The training exercises proved less than fruitful. Perhaps a reassessment of current tactics is warranted?" She placed a deliberate emphasis on current, implying a critique of his leadership. Malric ceased his pacing, his gaze sharp and probing. "Do you suspect someone is working against me?" The question hung suspended in the air, laden with suspicion. Elara met his intense stare without flinching. "To entertain such notions verges on sedition, Alpha. Yet perhaps some still yearn for bygone days. For an era before She trailed off, allowing the unspoken words before he usurped her magic to resonate. "Between them." Malric's jaw clenched. "The old ways are dead. I ensured their demise." He dismissed her with a curt gesture. Elara lowered her head in deference, but as she departed the chamber, a flicker of triumph ignited in her gaze. He was consumed by paranoia, isolated from his people, and desperately clinging to his waning authority. The ideal stage for her plan. That evening, a feast unfolded in the Great Hall. Typically a vibrant celebration of pack unity, the atmosphere was heavy with foreboding. The food tasted bland, the mead seemed thin and unsatisfying. Elara moved through the crowd, her senses alert, her ears attuned to the whispers circulating amongst the wolves. She overheard hushed conversations filled with discontent, wistful yearnings for the stability and prosperity of the past. "He's not been the same," one wolf shifter murmured to another, barely audible above the murmur. Since the sorceress incident, he's changed. "We possessed greater strength before," another responded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of dread and indignation. "Now, we inspire fear, yet command no respect." With subtle grace, Elara guided the conversations, planting seeds of doubt and dissatisfaction. She spoke of the necessity for strong leadership, for unwavering unity, for a leader who inspired trust, not terror. She avoided explicitly naming Malric, yet the implications were undeniable. As the feast progressed, a messenger burst into the hall, breathless and unkempt. He brought tidings of a border skirmish, a minor incursion by a neighboring pack. Conventionally, Malric would have responded with decisive force, spearheading a swift counterattack. However, tonight, he prevaricated. "Summon the War Council," he declared, his voice lacking its characteristic strength. "We shall deliberate on the appropriate course of action." The War Council extended late into the night. Elara, as Lyra, participated, subtly steering the discourse toward inaction. She advocated for restraint, for diplomatic avenues, for averting unnecessary conflict. She recognized that any perception of weakness would further diminish Malric's prestige, yet she skillfully framed her arguments as being in the best interests of the pack. Simultaneously, the pack members grew progressively more agitated. They interpreted Malric's hesitation as a sign of vulnerability, evidence of his failing reign. They craved decisive action, a demonstration of power, an unequivocal signal that their alpha would not tolerate aggression. By the time the War Council finally disbanded, the damage was irrevocable. Malric had resolved to dispatch an envoy, a gesture of peace that was perceived as weakness by both his own pack and their adversaries. An atmosphere of profound disappointment permeated the hall. As Elara returned to her allocated quarters, she struggled to suppress a triumphant smile. Malric played directly into her strategic game. His paranoia, his dread, his desperate grip on control were all contributing to his downfall. She was meticulously manipulating the unfolding narrative, orchestrating his ruin with the precision of a seasoned strategist. The subsequent day brought further unfortunate occurrences. A crucial shipment of iron ore suffered delays due to a collapsed bridge. A valuable hunting expedition returned empty-handed after being startled by a rogue beast. Each episode, apparently coincidental, amplified the mounting sense of disorder and incompetence surrounding Malric. He became increasingly volatile, increasingly unpredictable. He turned on his advisors, leveling accusations of treachery. He retreated into his chambers, enveloped in paranoia and suspicion, a king divorced from his kingdom, an alpha alienated from his pack. Elara maintained her vigil, patient and observant, as his dominion crumbled around him. She knew the pivotal moment was approaching, the time when she would cast aside her deceptive disguise and reclaim her rightful inheritance. She would seize his throne, not through physical force, but through astute deception. She would exploit his vulnerabilities, turn his authority against him, and leave him a shattered remnant of his former self. However, a sliver of reservation lingered within her. Could she genuinely condemn him to such a fate? Or would compassion, the very quality he had sought to eradicate in her, ultimately influence her decisions? The question remained unresolved, hanging like a gathering storm, threatening to unleash its fury upon them all. A shared doubt from the fringe of the training yard, Cale observed Elara, known to most as Advisor Lyra. The air vibrated with the roughhousing of young wolves, their growls and the smack of padded blows ringing against the cool morning. Yet, he locked onto Lyra. He'd marked her subtle manipulations, the convenient vanishing of key documents, the seemingly innocent advice offered to Malric. Insignificant on their own, easily overlooked as mere mistakes, they formed a pattern in Cale's mind, a calculated disruption noticed with his heightened senses. Now, she stood near the perimeter, eyes trained on Malric, who watched the drills with a listless air. A shadow of something unreadable flickered across her face, a momentary glimpse of what? Disgust? Scorn? He couldn't decipher it, only knew it lacked the respectful obedience expected of a royal advisor. He hesitated, weighing the risks, approaching her courted danger. Malric's suspicion was lethal, but the disquiet in Cale's gut had become a torment. Malric's rule had spiraled into unpredictable territory, his decisions dictated by paranoia and a hunger for dominance. The pack suffered, and Cale, reared on loyalty and honor, could no longer passively observe. He moved, his footfalls silenced by the earth. Halting a few paces behind, he spoke, his tone low and cautious. "Advisor Lyra?" She turned, her eyes, the color of a tempestuous sky, meeting his. "Cale," she acknowledged, her voice even, revealing nothing. "What brings you here?" I've been watching," he began, hesitant. "The Alpha's recent choices." A micro-tightening around her eyes betrayed an understanding beyond his words. "And what conclusions have you drawn, Cale?" She prompted, her tone neutral. He swallowed, the words heavy on his tongue. "They're troubling. His judgment feels compromised. Pack resources are being siphoned into frivolous endeavors. Patrols are stretched thin. Dissatisfaction festers." Lyra remained silent, her gaze unwavering, allowing him to fully articulate his concerns. "I know this borders on a treason," Cale confessed, his voice nearly lost, "but I can't shake the feeling that something is deeply amiss." He sought her eyes, pleading. "Have you perceived it as well?" A beat of silence hung heavy, punctuated by the sounds of the sparring wolves. Then a fleeting smile touched Lyra's lips. "Indeed, Cale," she conceded, her tone shifting. "I have." Relief flooded him, nearly buckling his resolve. He wasn't alone in his assessment. "Then, you comprehend?" "More than you can fathom," she replied, a spark of intensity in her eyes sending a chill down his spine. "Tell me, Cale, what measures are you prepared to take?" He wavered, torn between his oath to the Alpha and his allegiance to the pack. I don't know," he admitted, uncertainty weighing his words. "I swore an oath to the Alpha, but I also swore an oath to the pack's well-being." "Oaths can be redefined," Lyra suggested, her voice almost a caress, "particularly when the one demanding them has violated his own." She closed the distance, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Malric seized what was not his to claim. He hoards authority, while the pack hungers." Cale's thoughts raced. He had always revered the Alpha's position, the pack's intrinsic order. But Lyra's words resonated with a truth he could no longer deny. What do you propose?" he asked, his voice trembling. Lyra's smile widened, a predatory gleam igniting her eyes. "I propose we collaborate, Cale. You command the warrior's loyalty. I possess other skills." She paused, letting the implication linger. "Together, we can restore equilibrium. We can secure its survival." He studied her, seeing not just an advisor, but something far more formidable, more dangerous. A force capable of unraveling Malric's dominance, a thread of trepidation, interwoven with a strange thrill, coursed through him. What kind of skills?" he managed, his voice barely audible. "Skills Malric underestimates," she replied, a hint of steel coating her words. "Skills that will help us steer him towards a more enlightened path." Cale recognized the euphemism. Lyra envisioned something far more drastic than simply adjusting Malric's course. But desperation, the yearning to rescue his pack, surpassed his fear. "I'm in," he affirmed, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I'll aid you." Lyra's smile transformed. A rare and unsettlingly beautiful sight. "Excellent," she said. "Then we begin." She placed a hand on his arm, a jolt of energy surging through him at her touch. "But remember, Cale," she added, her voice a low warning, "this must remain concealed. Our alliance must remain secret." "Not until the moment is ripe." He nodded, his heart pounding. He had just embarked on a perilous path, one leading to either ruin or salvation. But he was no longer alone. He had an ally, a potent and enigmatic woman who shared his doubts and his longing for change. Together, they would challenge Alpha Malric's reign. The training continued, the pack's clamor fading as Cale and Lyra stood shoulder to shoulder. Their pact forged in secrecy, their gaze fixed on the Alpha, their minds plotting his downfall. Forced mating the great hall reeked of terror and suppressed fury. A heavy cloud that the hearth's blaze struggled to burn away. Atop his throne of fossilized wood, Malric scanned his pack with chilling detachment. The vibrant gold of his eyes, once a symbol of leadership, was now marred with caw. Unsettling crimson. Evidence of the dark magic consuming him. He lifted a hand, cutting off the restless muttering threatening to bloom into outright rebellion. "Silence!" he bellowed, his voice amplified by subtle enchantment. Each word dripping with arrogance that scraped against every wolf's sensibilities. "For too long, internal strife has gnawed at our strength. To cement my authority and ensure the future vigor of our bloodline, I have decreed Strategic unions. A collective intake of breath filled the chamber. Near the back, Cale felt a glacial dread seize him. He exchanged a horrified look with nearby warriors, their expressions mirroring his shock. Forced couplings were a relic of the past, deemed barbaric even by the most traditional packs. Malric had always condemned them, declaring them a violation of the wolves' sacred bond. What twisted path had brought him here? Malric pressed on, his tone utterly devoid of warmth. The pairings will be revealed at the full moon ceremony. Resistance will be met with swift, absolute consequences. His gaze swept over the assembly, lingering on those who dared meet his gaze with defiance. This is not a request, but law. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Then, a young wolf, fresh from her first shift, found her voice. It trembled, yet her eyes blazed with righteous indignation. You can't! Mating is a choice, a sacred connection built on love and respect, not a tool for your tyranny. Malric's eyes narrowed, and dark energy flickered around his fingertips. Silence, pup. Know your place. With a dismissive gesture, 2 massive guards seized the young wolf, dragging her towards the dungeon cells beneath the hall. Her stifled cries echoed, fueling the simmering rage that threatened to erupt. Cale's fists clenched, nails biting into his flesh. He couldn't stand idly by. This wasn't the pack he'd sworn to defend, nor the alpha he'd pledged loyalty to. He needed to find Lyra. As the pack dispersed, cloaked in a shared sense of despair, Cale slipped away toward Lyra's chambers. He found her silhouetted against the moonlight by the window. "Lyra," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Did you hear? He's gone mad, utterly lost." Lyra turned, her face unreadable in the dimness. "I heard, Cale, and I admit, even I underestimated the scope of his corruption." "What do we do?" Cale asked, desperation coloring his tone. "He's going to fracture the pack beyond repair." "Precisely," Lyra replied, her voice soft but resolute. "Which is why we must act. This forced breeding, it's a flashpoint, galvanizing the pack against him in a way nothing else could." "But how?" Cale asked, bewildered. "He's too strong. Open defiance will be crushed." "Not if we are strategic," Lyra said, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "The warriors respect you, Cale. They trust you. Use that influence, plant seeds of doubt, remind them of the values we've abandoned under Malric's reign." "And you? And you?" Cale asked. "What is it you've been concealing?" Lyra's eyes gleamed with unsettling intensity. "I possess certain skills Malric is unaware of. Let's just say I can influence events from the shadows, turning his strength against him." She paused, her gaze piercing. "But I need your help, Cale. Be my eyes and ears, gather information, and rally the warriors to our cause." Cale hesitated. The thought of betraying Malric filled him with unease. But looking at Lyra's unwavering resolve, he knew she was right. Malric had to be stopped before he destroyed everything. "What must I do?" Cale asked, his voice resolute. Lyra smiled, a predatory glint in her eyes. "First, we find Elara." "Elara?" Cale asked, puzzled. "But she's dead. Malric killed her years ago." "That is what Malric wants you to believe," Lyra said, her voice laced with mystery. "But I suspect she lives, and she may be the key to defeating him." She paused, letting her words settle. "Find her, Cale, and tell her that Lyra sends greetings." Meanwhile, deep within the forest shadows, Elara listened to the wind's lament, the pack's panicked whispers echoing Malric's despotic decree. She felt their fear, their despair, and their simmering fury, and a cold satisfaction settled in her heart. Malric's hubris was his downfall. He believed he could control them through intimidation, but he underestimated the wolf spirit's resilience, the unyielding thirst for freedom burning within them. And he underestimated her. She had been patient, gathering strength, waiting for the opportune moment. That moment was now. Malric's forced mating announcement was the spark, igniting the rebellion and toppling his reign. She closed her eyes, reaching out to the pack, planting defiance in their hearts, whispering promises of freedom, justice, and a return to the old ways, governed by wisdom and compassion, not fear and tyranny. Then she turned her attention to Kale, the loyal warrior torn between duty and conscience. She felt his doubt, his confusion, and his growing resolve. She sought his meeting with Lyra, heard their hushed plans, and a flicker of hope ignited within her. Lyra played a dangerous game, but she was a potent ally. And Kale was the key. He could rally the warriors, turning the tide against Malric. She sent a silent message on the wind, a whisper in his mind. Trust Lyra. She knows the path. And know this, Kale Shadowclaw, you are not alone. Elara opened her eyes, fixed on the distant packlands. Hiding was over. The time for whispers had passed. The time for vengeance had come. She smiled, a cold, predatory smile mirroring Lyra's. Malric had stolen her power. Now she would claim his throne, and he would learn the true meaning of terror. The pack lands awaited, ripe for revolution. The game had begun. Evidence of treachery, the chill of the pre-dawn air bit at Kale's exposed skin as he crept through the shadowed edges of the Alpha's personal den. Moonlight painted long, distorted shapes across the polished floor, turning familiar objects into menacing specters. He inhaled deeply, the scent of pine and something darker, something metallic and faintly acrid, filling his nostrils. That was Malric's scent, amplified, corrupted. He pressed on, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wasn't searching for trinkets or trophies. He was hunting for truth. For weeks, Kale had been plagued by doubt, a gnawing unease that threatened to unravel his loyalty to the pack. Malric's decrees, once sharp and decisive, had become erratic, cruel. The forced couplings, the increasingly frequent displays of raw, untamed power, it all felt wrong, a betrayal of the very principles the pack was built upon. Lyra's quiet words had fanned the embers of his suspicion, pointing him towards the possibility that the Alpha's strength wasn't natural, wasn't earned. He found it tucked away in a hidden compartment behind Malric's sleeping platform. A collection of journals bound in scarred leather. The scent of old parchment and dried ink wafted from them as he carefully pulled one free. Its pages were filled with Malric's spidery script, detailing not just pack business, but personal reflections, strategic calculations, and, disturbingly, meticulous accounts of Elara's draining. Kale's blood ran cold as he read. Malric described Elara not as a respected sorceress or a valued advisor, but as a resource, a battery to be exploited. The entries grew increasingly callous, revealing a calculated plan to usurp her power and solidify his own dominance. Dates and times aligned with Elara's documented decline, the slow erosion of her magic, culminating in her supposed death. He swallowed hard, bile rising in his throat. This wasn't strength, it was theft. He found more. Records of falsified accounts, manipulated testimonies used to condemn rivals, and secret alliances forged with rogue wolves outside the pack's territory. Each piece of evidence painted a damning portrait of a leader consumed by ambition, willing to sacrifice anything, anyone, to maintain his grip on power. Cale carefully gathered the journals, his hands trembling. The weight of the truth felt heavier than any physical burden. The full moon hung high in the inky sky as Cale stood before the assembled pack. The air crackled with anticipation. Whispers rippled through the crowd, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He held the journals aloft, their leather covers gleaming in the moonlight. "For too long we have followed blindly," Cale's voice rang out, amplified by his wolfen strength. "We have trusted in our alpha without question. But trust must be earned, and loyalty must be deserved." A low growl rumbled from the front of the crowd. It was Borak, Malric's second-in-command, his face a mask of barely suppressed fury. "What is the meaning of this, Cale? Are you questioning the Alpha's authority?" Cale met Borak's gaze, his own unwavering. "I am questioning the foundation upon which that authority is built." He opened one of the journals, his voice resonating with controlled anger. "These are Malric's personal journals. They detail his rise to power, the sacrifices he made, and the lies he told to get there." He read excerpts aloud, his voice echoing through the clearing. He spoke of the manipulation of Elara, the systematic draining of her magic, the calculated deceit that led to her demise. He read of the falsified accusations against those who dared to challenge Malric, the secret alliances that threatened the pack's stability. A gasp swept through the crowd. Faces etched with shock, disbelief, and dawning anger turned towards the Alpha's den. "This is a lie!" Borak roared, stepping forward. "Cale is a traitor, spreading falsehoods to undermine our leader." "These are Malric's own words," Cale countered, holding up the journal. "His own handwriting. Examine them yourselves." He tossed the journals into the crowd. A tense silence descended as pack members cautiously reached for them, their eyes scanning the damning words. Murmurs erupted, escalating into heated arguments. Some defended Malric, clinging to their loyalty, while others expressed outrage and betrayal. A young she-wolf, her eyes blazing with anger, stepped forward. "My father questioned Malric's tactics years ago. He was banished, branded a rogue. Now I understand why." An older male, his face lined with years of service to the pack, shook his head in disbelief. "I served with Elara. She was a powerful and compassionate leader. To think that Malric—" He trailed off, unable to voice his disgust. The crowd was fracturing, divided by doubt and disillusionment. The unity that had once defined the pack was crumbling before his very eyes. Cale watched, his heart heavy. He had hoped for justice, for truth, but he had unleashed chaos. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the clearing. The ground trembled as Malric emerged from his den, his eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. He was followed by a contingent of his most loyal guards, their faces grim, their hands resting on their weapons. "Treachery!" Malric's voice boomed, laced with fury. "Cale Shadowclaw, you have betrayed my trust, undermined my authority, and spread lies among my pack. For this, you will pay the ultimate price." He lunged forward, his claws extended, his eyes fixed on Cale. The pack erupted in chaos. Some rushed to defend Cale. Others stood frozen in fear, unsure of who to trust. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, and now the battle for the pack's soul had begun. As Malric bore down on him, Cale braced himself, knowing that this was only the beginning. He had exposed the truth, but the fight for justice was far from over. He saw Lyra watching from the edge of the crowd, her expression unreadable. He wondered if she had anticipated this outcome, if she had known the price of truth would be so high. And then, for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a flicker of movement in the shadows beyond the clearing, a hint of a familiar presence, a whisper of forgotten magic. Elara? The thought flickered through his mind like a lightning strike, a desperate hope in the face of impending doom. But then Malric was upon him, and the world dissolved into a whirlwind of claws and fury. Accusations and revelations, the air vibrated with suppressed force, thick with resinous fragrance and the foreboding promise of a downpour. Malric, his expression a scowl of dark intensity, jabbed a wavering digit at Elara. She's venom incarnate, a fraud, poisoning your minds with fabricated tales. His voice, usually a resonant declaration, was strained, betraying the fear he fought to conceal. He circled before the assembled werewolves, his shadow distorted and grotesque in the flickering torchlight. She's been whispering falsehoods, twisting my commands, engineering events to paint me as a tyrant. You've all been manipulated. Cale advanced, jaw tight with resolve. That's untrue, Malric. Elara has revealed to us. Revealed what, Cale? Fantasies? She's an enchantress, a weaver of illusions. She can warp reality itself. Don't be taken in by her performance. Malric's gaze flicked about nervously, seeking allies in the gathering. Few met his anxious scrutiny. The revelations contained within his purloined journals had festered, like a virulent infection. Elara remained still, a bastion of composure amid the tempest of accusations. Her silver irises, typically alight with quiet amusement, were now like polished ice, radiating glacial intensity. She permitted Malric's tirade, allowed him to thrash and dig his own grave. Let him expose his dread, his delusions, his vulnerability. It was all proceeding as foreseen. At last, when Malric's voice frayed, when his accusations crumbled into repetitive, desperate pleas for understanding, Elara lifted a hand. The ensuing silence was complete, a suffocating blanket. "Enough, Malric," she stated, her tone resonating with a power that belied her delicate build. It was a tone that commanded attention, a voice steeped in countless untold histories and long-dormant sorcery. They deserve to know the truth. She turned, her gaze traversing the faces of warriors, healers, and pups, each visage etched with bewilderment, trepidation, and a growing sense of treachery. "You know me as Lyra," she began, her voice clear and potent, slicing through the tension like a frozen blade. "But that is not my given name. My name is Elara Meadowlight." A communal gasp cascaded through the assembly. The appellation was legend, a hushed account of a sorceress of unimaginable might, a guardian of the pack, who had vanished ages prior, presumed deceased. Some of the elder wolves recalled her, their eyes widening with incredulity. Cale stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the gentle Lyra with the mythic Elara. Malric stumbled backward, his face losing all color. "No impossible," he breathed, the words faint. "She's dead. I ensured it." Elara's eyes locked onto Malric's, a silent pledge of retribution conveyed between them. "You stole my magic, Malric," she declared, her voice tinged with a sorrow that resonated deep within the hearts of all present. "You robbed me of my life, my power, my very essence. You abandoned me to perish in the wilds, confident that you had snuffed out my flame." She raised her hands, and a vibrant vortex of raw energy erupted about her, bathing the glade in an otherworldly luminescence. The air throbbed with unleashed power, the sharp tang of ozone stinging their nostrils. The wolves recoiled, instinctively recognizing the untamed magic coursing through her. But you were mistaken, Elara continued, her voice now a force of nature itself. Magic cannot be extinguished, merely transformed. And in my transformation, I have become something more. She lowered her hands, the vortex fading, leaving behind an ethereal afterglow. I have returned to reclaim what was taken, to reveal your perfidy and to free this pack from your despotic reign. A murmur rippled through the pack, a volatile mix of awe, fear, and nascent hope. Some wolves instinctively shifted, hackles rising, torn between defending their alpha and heeding the words of the resurrected sorceress. Others remained transfixed, stunned by the sheer audacity of Elara's proclamation. Kale, however, found his voice. "Malric," he demanded, his tone ringing with newfound conviction. "Is this truth? Did you steal Elara's magic?" Malric stood frozen, his eyes darting between Elara and the pack, his carefully crafted charade dissolving. He opened his mouth to refute it, to spin another web of deceit, but the words died in his throat. The unvarnished truth hung heavy, undeniable. Finally he emitted a strangled cry, a sound of raw, unadulterated fury. "Yes, I did it, and I would repeat it. She was too formidable, too dangerous. I acted to safeguard the pack." His confession detonated like a sonic boom, obliterating the final vestiges of loyalty some still harbored. A tide of anger surged through the pack, directed at Malric for his treachery, his lies, his abuse. Elara stepped forward, her eyes blazing with righteous fire. "You didn't safeguard the pack, Malric. You subjugated them. You exploited my gifts to fuel your ambitions, to reinforce your dominance, to crush dissent." She halted directly before Malric, her gaze piercing his very core. "But your reign is finished," she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet carrying the weight of 1,000 tempests. "The hour of reckoning is here." The pack held its breath, awaiting the collision between the deposed alpha and the returned sorceress. The air crackled with anticipation, the sense of blood and magic intermingling in the tense silence. The pack's destiny, the future of their world, hung precariously, balanced on a knife's edge. "Battle for the pack," a guttural bellow, ripped from a silverback sworn to Malric, signaled the assault. The sound vibrated across the glade, met by a chorus of defiant howls erupting from the assembled rebels. Elara felt the magic surge within her, a vibrant force demanding release. Lifting her hand, she conjured a shimmering barrier of pure energy, intercepting the initial flurry of arrows launched from Malric's guard. "For the pack," Kale roared, his voice ringing out amidst the chaos. With a series of cracking bones and shifting muscles, he transformed into his wolf guise, a magnificent gray beast whose eyes blazed with righteous anger. He became a whirlwind of fang and claw, carving a path through Malric's ranks, allowing the rebels to flood forward. The atmosphere hummed as Elara unleashed her counterattack. Lances of sheer power slammed into the shield wall of Malric's elite, shattering their cohesion. A surge of untamed force emanated from her, sending soldiers sprawling. She moved with fluid agility, a destructive dancer weaving through the fray. "Turncoats!" bellowed a massive lupine brute, Malric's guard captain, his fur slick with gore. He lunged towards Elara, axe raised, intent on splitting her skull. A contemptuous smirk touched Elara's lips. Evading his clumsy strike, she flicked her wrist, summoning a spiraling vortex of wind that smashed into him, sending him reeling, his weapon clattering to the ground. Before he could regain his footing, she had him pinned, a knee digging into his chest, magic searing his flesh. "Where is he?" she pressed, her voice a low, menacing rumble. "Where's Malric?" The captain spat, defiance burning in his gaze. "He'll crush you, sorceress. You're nothing." Elara's eyes narrowed to slits. "Loyalty is admirable, but blind faith is foolish." She intensified her hold, and the captain howled, the air shimmering with magical potency. "Tell me," she hissed, "or your devotion will earn you oblivion." Suddenly, a shadow fell across them. Kale, his fur stained crimson, stood panting, his gaze riveted on something behind her. "Elara, watch out!" Whirling around, magic flaring, she found Malric at the edge of the clearing, encircled by his most devout bodyguards. He was a figure of wrathful splendor, his eyes burning with frigid intensity. Stolen magic crackled around him, a warped imitation of her own gift. "Elara Meadowlight," he growled, his voice a suppressed snarl that echoed with contained rage. "I should have snuffed you out when I had the occasion." "You had your chance, Malric," she countered, her voice resonating with assurance. "Now, it's my turn." The battle spiraled around them, a chaotic ballet of death and defiance. Emboldened by Elara's presence and Kale's savagery, the rebels fought with fresh commitment, pushing back Malric's forces. Yet, Malric's guard, well-drilled and fanatically devoted, made victory far from certain. Kale, sensing the imminent clash between Elara and Malric, positioned himself as a snarling lupine bulwark. "He won't lay a hand on you, Elara," he rumbled, his focus locked on Malric. A harsh, grating laugh burst from Malric. "You imagine you can protect her, Kale. You're a fool. I crafted you. I can just as easily shatter you." "You misjudge me, Malric," Kale retorted, his tone firm, despite the undercurrent of fear. "I am no longer the naive whelp you manipulated." Malric advanced, his gaze unwavering from Elara. "This is between us, Elara. Let's conclude this definitively." Elara nodded, stepping forward, her power amassing, a palpable force pressing against the very air. "Agreed. The pack has suffered under your despotic rule for too long." The two leaders confronted each other, the pack's fate hanging precariously. The surrounding combat seemed to diminish, as all eyes were drawn to the approaching confrontation. Malric surged forward, a blur of motion, his claws extended, dripping with ominous energy. Elara parried his attack with a shield of pure light, deflecting the blow. The force generated shockwaves that rippled across the clearing. Elara countered with a wave of raw force, sending Malric staggering backward. He snarled, his eyes blazing with fury. "You may have recovered some of your power, but it will never suffice to overcome me. I am far stronger now." "Might isn't everything, Malric," Elara asserted, her voice composed despite the conflict's intensity. "It's how you wield it that matters." She unleashed a flurry of spells, each crafted to weaken and unbalance him. She fought not merely with raw power, but strategy, knowledge, understanding of his frailties gained from her days at his side. Kale, spotting an opening, launched himself at Malric, distracting him just long enough for Elara to strike a telling blow. Her fist slammed into his jaw, sending him sprawling to the earth. Malric roared with pain and fury, scrambling to regain his footing. He unleashed a surge of dark energy, flinging Kale backward, crashing into a tree. "Kale!" Elara cried, her voice etched with concern. She rushed to his side, shielding him from further assault. "I'm all right," he gasped, struggling upright. "Finish him, Elara. For the pack." Elara nodded, her eyes hardening with determination. She turned back to Malric, her power building to a climax. This ends now, Malric. She unleashed her full power, a deluge of pure energy that engulfed him. He screamed, his body contorted in agony, his stolen magic flickering, then extinguishing. As the energy dispersed, Malric collapsed to his knees, broken. His eyes were wide with disbelief, his face gaunt and ashen. The stolen magic that had been his source of power was gone, leaving him a hollow shell. As Malric's loyalists saw his defeat, the surrounding combat faltered. They dropped their weapons, their faces mirroring despair. The rebels erupted in victorious shouts, their voices reverberating across the glade. Elara approached Malric, her eyes holding both pity and contempt. "It's over, Malric. Your reign has concluded." He looked up at her, his eyes brimming with rancor. "You may have prevailed in this skirmish, Elara, but you will never genuinely overcome me. I will forever be a piece of you." Elara gazed at him for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. Then, she arrived at a decision that startled everyone, even herself. "I could end you, Malric," she stated, her voice soft yet unwavering. "But that would merely perpetuate the cycle of violence. Instead, I extend you a choice." She offered him her hand. "Relinquish your claim to the throne, acknowledge your transgressions against the pack, and perhaps, eventually, you might discover redemption." Malric stared at her outstretched hand, his eyes laced with suspicion. He looked up at her, his expression a blend of confusion and disbelief. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Why would you propose this?" Elara smiled sadly. "Because, unlike you, Malric, I believe in the potential for change. I believe that even you can uncover a path to atone for your misdeeds." A chance at redemption. The atmosphere thrummed, not with anticipation, but the dull ache following a cataclysm, the aftermath of a battle that had fractured the throne room's very foundations. Sunlight lanced through jagged rents in the windows, illuminating dancing particles of pulverized stone and the stark tableau. Elara, breathing hard, seemingly untouched, versus Malric, collapsed at her feet, his face a canvas of shock and agony. His once pristine armor was defiled, stained umber by her unleashed sorcery. The air around him vibrated with the vacuum left by his stolen power. "Impossible," he croaked, voice shredded. I possessed your magic. I was your magic." Elara's eyes, the color of a tempest brewing on the horizon, narrowed to slits. "You held a sliver, Malric, a filched fragment you never grasped. You mistook brute force for comprehension, domination for genuine strength." She lifted a hand, and a strand of pure, coruscating energy drifted toward him, not to strike, but to hover, a tantalizing taunt. "Did you honestly believe that unbridled power, devoid of empathy, could forge you into a legitimate king?" He recoiled from the light, a tremor of stark terror cracking the veneer of arrogance that had long defined him. "I did what was vital, for the clan, for our continuation." Elara spat out a harsh, mirthless sound. "Vital? You enslaved them, Malric. You governed through intimidation, quashing any whisper of dissent. Your empire was erected on the backs of innocents, fueled by purloined magic and hollow promises." She advanced, her shadow engulfing him. "So, what future were you building, Malric? One of unending gloom, where only your dominance held significance." Kale, who had stood rooted at the room's periphery, finally broke free from his paralysis. "Elara, enough. He's beaten. We've prevailed." He studied her, his face a complex blend of relief and trepidation. He'd fought by her side, a first-hand witness to her astonishing might. yet couldn't shake the sense that he now stood before a force he barely understood. "Have we, Chaol?" Elara countered, her gaze locked on Malric. "Have we truly won if we simply exchange one oppressor for another, even one adorned in the guise of righteousness?" She knelt, bringing her face level with Malric's. "I could extinguish you here, Malric, with a mere thought. I could snuff out your existence and scrub your name from the scrolls of history. And a part of me yearns to do just that, to settle the debt for years of suffering, for the betrayal, for the theft of my very essence." She paused, and silence dropped like a shroud, thick with unspoken agony. Malric remained mute, his gaze fixed on her, braced for the inevitable. "But that," Elara pressed on, a subtle softening in her tone, "would simply mirror your depravity. It would perpetuate the cycle of brutality, the insatiable hunger for vengeance that has plagued our kind for, quote, generations." She retracted the tendril of energy it dissolved into nothing, leaving a void of immeasurable loss. "I will not execute you, Malric." The proclamation hung in the balance, a shockwave through the assembled rebels who had anticipated, perhaps even craved, a swift and definitive end. Malric's eyes widened, a nascent hope sparked within their depths. What are you proposing?" "You will live," Elara declared. "But not as a sovereign, not as a ruler. You will live as a living testament, a constant reminder of the perils of unbridled power, the corrosive effect of ambition unmoored from morality." You would spare me," he stammered, struggling to process her choice. "I offer you an opportunity, Malric," Elara countered, her voice unwavering. "A chance to make amends for your transgressions, a chance to begin repairing what you've shattered, a chance to prove that even someone as deeply flawed as you can unearth redemption." "Redemption?" he echoed, the word a foreign substance on his tongue. "How?" "You will abdicate your claim to the throne," Elara stated. "You will openly acknowledge your crimes against the clan, and you will commit the remainder of your life to serving them, to mitigating the devastation you wrought." Chaol stepped forward, a frown etching his brow. "Elara, are you certain about this? He's a menace. He could attempt to reclaim his dominion." "He will be monitored," Elara pledged, "incessantly. And his magic, the stolen magic, will be restored to its rightful source. It will be channeled to mend the land, to safeguard the clan, not to subjugate it." She refocused on Malric. "Do you consent to these terms?" Malric's gaze was intense, his mind a whirlwind. He had anticipated oblivion, a rapid and merciless demise. But this was far more intricate, far more harrowing. To exist, stripped of his strength, his command, his very persona, was a fate grimmer than death. Yet, deep within, a flicker of hope stirred. A chance to rebuild, to atone, to perhaps, someday, earn absolution. He forced himself to swallow, the obstruction in his throat almost suffocating him. I consent," he rasped, the words barely audible. Elara nodded, a trace of what might have been satisfaction in her gaze. "Then so it shall be. Let the healing commence." She faced Chaol. "The clan requires a leader, someone they can rely on, someone who will govern with empathy and fairness, someone who understands the true meaning of force." She fixed him with a pointed look. "Someone like you, Chaol." Chaol's eyes widened in disbelief. "Me? But I—" "You have proven your unwavering loyalty," your courage, and your selflessness," Elara interjected. "You have waged war for the liberation of our people, and you have demonstrated that you are prepared to prioritize their well-being above your own. The clan needs you, Kale, and I believe you are ready to guide them." The gravity of her words settled on him, heavy and profound. He gazed at the faces of the rebels, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. He looked at Malric, humbled and broken, a potent reminder of the ramifications of unchecked authority. And he looked at Elara, the woman who had clawed her way back from the brink, wielding power capable of reshaping the world, offering him an opportunity to construct a better tomorrow. He drew a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. "Then I accept," he affirmed, his voice resolute. "I will strive to guide the clan with equity and compassion. I will not betray their trust." Elara smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that illuminated the chamber. "I know you won't, Kale. I know you won't." She addressed the assemblage. "Let it be proclaimed. Malric has relinquished his kingship, and Kale will be our new guide. Let us embark on the work of rebuilding our clan, of forging a future where concord and prosperity flourish." A roar of approval thundered from the crowd, a tidal wave of relief and optimism sweeping over the throne room. The protracted period of oppression had come to an end, and a new dawn was upon them. Yet, as Elara regarded Malric, still sprawled on the floor, his eyes a mixture of shame and resignation, she understood that the path to absolution would be protracted and demanding. And she knew that her own odyssey was far from complete. The scars of the past were etched deep, and the specters of her own vengeance still lingered in her mind. But for the moment, at least, a tenuous peace had been established, and within that peace, a flicker of hope for a brighter future had begun to glimmer. A new dawn, the dawn arrived painted, not with war's gore, but with a blush of rose that tenderly caressed the wounded earth. Elara surveyed her assembled people from Cati. The ridge, their faces, lined with weariness and doubt, were upturned to her. The air vibrated with unspoken anxieties, a silent plea hanging in the balance. Was she merely another oppressor, another fist poised to strike? She raised a hand, and the forest hushed. Even the wind seemed to pause. "My kin," Elara began, her voice imbued with a newfound strength, a quiet command that drew attention without force. "For too long we've languished in fear's shadow, crushed beneath oppression's weight. Malric's rule was a tapestry woven with stolen power, fueled by cruelty and secured by deceit. That tyranny is over now." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Kale, positioned near the front, locked eyes with her, his expression a mixture of expectation and apprehension and apprehension. He, above most, understood the extent of Malric's wickedness. "I've returned not to perpetuate violence, but to end it." Elara pressed on, her voice gaining fervor, igniting a flame in her audience's hearts. "Justice will be served, but tempered with mercy. The afflicted will find solace. The wronged will be made whole. We will rebuild, not upon fear's shaky foundations, but on the solid ground of empathy and justice." She paused, letting her words resonate, sink deep into their exhausted spirits. "Malric will live, not as a sovereign, but as a walking testament to the perils of unbridled authority. He will serve this clan, and in that service, perhaps, discover a sliver of redemption. True leadership, however, demands more than brute force. It demands understanding, sacrifice, a willingness to prioritize others' needs above your own." Elara turned to Kale, her gaze softening. "Kale Shadowclaw, you have demonstrated bravery, allegiance, and an unwavering dedication to what is right. You stood defiantly against tyranny, even in the face of despair. You've earned the trust of this pack, and you have earned mine. I name you leader of the Meadowlight clan." A collective intake of breath swept through the assembly. Cale stepped forward, his features etched with astonishment. "Elara, I am at a loss for words. I don't know if I'm equal to this task." Elara's smile bloomed, a genuine, warm light that dissolved the shadows on her face. "You are ready. Cale, you possess the heart, the strength, and the wisdom to guide this clan toward a brighter horizon. I will be here to advise and support you, but the burden and the honor now fall to you." The pack erupted in joyous noise, a triumphant wave of sound that echoed through the trees, heralding the end of an era and the dawn of a new one. Wolves who had cowered in terror just days before now stood erect, their eyes gleaming with renewed hope. They surged forward, engulfing Cale, patting his back and offering gratitude and excitement. As Cale was swept up in the throng, Elara felt a gentle touch on her arm. She turned to find Anya, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Elara," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "You have given us our lives back." Elara clasped Anya's hand. "We accomplished this together, Anya. All of us." Later, as the fervor subsided, Elara discovered Cale standing alone at the forest's edge, his gaze fixed on the horizon. She approached silently. "Feeling a bit overwhelmed?" she queried, a playful note in her voice. Cale turned, still flushed with elation. "A little," he confessed with a wry grin. "It's quite a lot to absorb." "You'll flourish," Elara assured him, her voice brimming with certainty. "You have the full support of your pack, but I'll also need your guidance," Cale replied, his eyes meeting hers. "I don't know how to lead. Not really. I've only ever known how to fight. Leading is merely a different sort of battle," Elara explained softly. "A battle for fairness, for equality, for a better tomorrow. And you, Cale Shadowclaw, were born to fight." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle susurrus of leaves. An unspoken energy crackled in the air between them, a connection that transcended friendship, superseded loyalty. Elara felt a warmth blossom in her chest, a feeling she had suppressed for years. "Elara," Cale began, his voice hesitant, "there's something I need to express." Before he could continue, Elara placed a hand on his arm, halting him. "Not now, Cale," she murmured. "That can wait. Right now, we have a clan to rebuild." Cale nodded, understanding mirrored in his eyes. He knew she spoke truth. More immediate matters awaited. Yet the unspoken words lingered, a silent promise of things to come. Turning her back to Cale, Elara turned her attention to the land itself. The scars of Malric's dominion were ubiquitous with the trees, infertile fields, poisoned waters. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her magic, sensing the pulse of the earth beneath her. She channeled her energy, drawing upon the ancient power within, and commenced the healing. A verdant glow emanated from her hands, radiating outwards like expanding circles on a pond. The blighted trees began to unfurl new leaves, their branches reaching towards the sky. The barren fields blossomed into lush green, bursting with wild flowers. The tainted streams cleared, flowing with pure water teeming with life. The pack watched in wonder as the land transformed before their eyes. They had witnessed Elara's power in combat, but this was different, more profound. This was the power of creation, of restoration, of hope, made manifest. As the sun climbed, bathing the territory in golden radiance, Elara opened her eyes. The forest was vibrant once more, teeming with renewed energy. The remnants of Malric's reign were receding, yielding to the promise of renewal. She turned back to Kale, a smile lighting her face. "A new dawn, Kale," she said softly. "A new dawn for all of us."